more you push the body, the more you start to realize that you can override that central governor theory, that innate sort of desire for self-preservation. Do you know what, Rob? I love what you just said there, because you're one of the very few people who sort of addressed that, where I think a motivating factor was I was the idiot who said I was going to do this, you know, whatever it was, whether I said, you know, I'm going to swim around Great Britain, I'm going to climb a rope the height of Everest. So I think there was an element of my ego just being there, like, if you pack this in, everyone will go, well, you said you'd do it. No one had a gun to your head. So I think there was definitely an element of that. All of these things that I just found that sports science no longer had the answers. And what I meant by that was, take swimming, for example. Swimming as a sport exists in a pool, you know, the controlled pools, it's the parameters are very easily set. But what I found is when I'm swimming and my tongue's falling off, I've got a jellyfish on my face, you know, I'm in an Arctic storm, you know, I'm just going, well, you know, sports science can only get me so far now. And that's where I think Stoicism helped me so much. Just looking at, you know, controlling the controllables, accepting the uncontrollables. Marcus Aurelius and all of his teachings, they resonated with me so much with that. And I just found, and I'm not just saying it, with the Daily Stoic, between tides, as a team, we all read it. And I remember in Scotland, we got caught in an Arctic storm, and then the tide changes every 6 hours. So if there's sort of Great Britain, tide changes. So you swim when it's with you, you stop when it's against you, and you rest. And it didn't matter if it was 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you got in the water. And sometimes I had to just crack the wetsuit because it was frozen. I had to crack it before I could put it on to get in. And there was some times where we just picked up Daily Stoic and we were just like, anything in there that is going to get us through this next tide, you know? And so that was basically it. There was no one mechanism to keep getting in the water. There was a few. And again, I love that you've said that, because so often people think that fatigue is just a physical thing, you know, but only now we're sort of really appreciating that it's an interaction between your psychology and your physiology. It was Tim Noakes who came up with the central governor theory, where he said that fatigue is an emotionally driven state that we basically use to pull the physiological handbrake. And what he meant by that is, say me and you right now, Ryan, we went and ran a marathon. We were like, yeah, let's go run a marathon. And we got to 18 miles. All of a sudden, you'd get this biological feedback. You'd be carb depleted, overheating, or you'd be cold, depending on, you know, where you are. You'd be dehydrated, electrolytes, just all of these things, heart rate too high. So you'd get all of this biological feedback to the brain, and the brain's this hypochondriac that's just trying to keep you safe. Right. And so the brain's going, whoa, no, we're 18 miles in, you need to stop or slow down. You know, you hit the wall, you know, all of a sudden your brain's going, this is a terrible idea, stop, turn back, you know, go and get a takeaway and go home and run a bubble bath, is what it's trying to tell you. And it's only now that Tim Noakes says that, you know, we have to override that. We have to understand that, no, okay, noted all of those biological signals, but we're safe, we're okay. And a lot of people now sort of said, you know, central governor kind of infers that there's this thing inside of your brain. So they prefer the psychobiological model of fatigue. It's essentially the same thing. And what I love as well is dating back to the Marcus Aurelius, you know, when he was talking about that same interaction as well, you know, when he was talking about, you know, quitting and endurance. And it was amazing that they weren't aware of central governor theory, psychobiological model of fatigue. But it's the same thing. And I think in that moment, when that happens at that 18-mile mark of a marathon, if you're doing hill sprints, even if you're doing like jujitsu and some guy's like kneeling on your neck and you're just like, I just want to give up. I'm not in pain as such, but it's uncomfortable. You have to stoically and objectively, void of emotional sort of, you know, decisions, go, actually, am I really in pain? Am I about to, you know, die? All of these things where people, I can't go on, my legs are going to fall off. But are they? Are your legs going to fall off? My lungs are going to explode. Let me stop you there. Are they going to explode? And it's a real art, and you have to practice it time and again. And then the more you push the body, the more you start to realize that you can override that central governor theory, that innate sort of desire for self-preservation. And I think after the Great British Swim, for instance, 157 days, 780 miles, tongue falling off, hypothermia, all sorts. And so now it's funny because even when I swim now and people go, Ross, like your lips are blue, like Ross, your tongue, like parts of it are falling off. I'll go, oh, no, this is nothing. You can push beyond that. Point. I think it was a combination of things. There were certainly moments where it kind of stood out, but quite often it was just when I was training at Loughborough University, and even before that, reading a lot of sports science journals. They will say, you can't train every single day. You need a rest day. Don't train over 45 minutes because all of a sudden you go catabolic and your cortisol stress hormones go through there. All of these things. And I was like, No, that's not strictly true. And again, a friend of mine, Jeff Capes, a two-time former world's strongest man, way back in the day, before sports science was kind of a little bit restrictive, telling you what you can and can't do, he was just like shifting hay bales, working in, the fields all day, and then would go and perform these Herculean feats of strength. And that sports science would go, well, that's not possible. And I know you do get these outliers, but I think like so often society, sports science, everything, they just sort of make these rules and you just go, but it just doesn't apply to everyone. And when you've come out the other side of swims, the Great British Swim is a great example. People said, you just can't do it. You can't swim that length for 157 days. And it's not pleasant. I don't recommend it. But since coming back, I was like, no, you can.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's sort of like you said this earlier, but this is true for like sort of people who give advice. This is true for your parents. Everyone in the world wants to keep you safe. That's their main thing. They just don't want you to die or hurt yourself, which is great. But that if you listen to that all the time, you leave a lot on the table.
That is such a good way of putting it, because it doesn't come from a bad place when people put in these restrictions on you. And then, I mean, my favorite story was, and it really did inspire my own swim, but Captain Webb. So for those people who don't know, 1875, people said you cannot swim across the English Channel from England to France. They're like, it can't be done. It's, 21 miles, but they were like, the water's too cold, tides are too strong. It just simply cannot be done. But Captain Webb, and this is the part I love, he sort of dropped out of the Navy, started training full time, and on a diet of beef broth and brandy, he swum breaststroke all the way across because front crawl was ungentlemanly like at the time. So his brother and his cousin were just feeding him beef broth and he just crushed it. And he did it in, I believe it was like 26 hours. The current record might be below 6, but it was just the way he did it. Same with Roger Bannister. People said, can't run under a 4-minute mile, can't be done. Kipchoge recently, 2-hour marathon. People were like, it just can't be done. Leading physicians, really intelligent people were just like, you can't do it. And then as soon as Roger Bannister did it, what I also love is collectively, all of a sudden, everyone started to run under the 4-minute mile. And it was just that once the floodgates were open. So sometimes you're absolutely right, Ryan. I think people just want to keep you safe, or they're giving you advice based on their own parameters. But it takes a really sort of strong-willed person just to be like, no. And based on central governor theory, psychobiological model of fatigue, you go, I think I can push beyond it. Yeah. Yeah, do you know what? Because a lot of people can sort of take my advice and it's like a pendulum. It swings too far. And I'm like, no, do not like kill yourself off. Like barefoot running is a great example. I'm a huge advocate of that, but I'm like, build it up. So you see people throw their shoes away and then just go, I'm like, no, don't do that. So to answer your question, one of the best mechanisms that I've always found, and I call it almost outsourcing common sense, certainly on the swim, there was times when your cognitive functioning, because you're tired, sleep deprived, cold, you have the cognitive functioning of like a 5-year-old.
Sure.
You understand one arm in front of the other and eat. That's it. And certainly with Captain Matt, who was the captain of the whole swim, I would be looking at him and just being like, if I'm not making much sense, if I'm going backwards, there was sometimes, I remember I was so sleep deprived, I was swimming at night and I was sighting off this light off the boat, and I must have just lost concentration for a split second, and then all of a sudden thought that the light on the boat was the moon. So I just started swimming like back the other way, and they're going, Ross, what are you? That's not the boat, that's the moon. And they were like, you're not thinking quite right now, Ross. And I think when you trust the team around you or the advice, that can be really empowering, because you can push yourself knowing that there's that safety net. You go, I'm going to take this as far as I can. 100%, yeah. And I think this is, as a sports science example, this is going to sound weird, but to do a full VO2 test, so your lung capacity on a treadmill at Loughborough University, we do this, and you get hooked up into basically like a horse harness, and they just go like, you go until you are dribbling and just kind of like held like a puppet. So we've got that coming up, and it's exactly what you said. Make sure the infrastructure around you, the people, the infrastructure, everything can protect you, so you can solely focus on overriding that psychobiological model of fatigue if it's physical. Or I love what you said there, creatively, just go nuts knowing that people are going to edit it later. And yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually. Yeah. Yeah, you have to check yourself, especially when swimming, because swimming for that length of time, especially when you're at night. So we worked out, obviously I swam 6 hours on, 6 hours on, 6 hours off for what was essentially 5 months. So doing the math very quickly, I spent 2 months in complete darkness counting the night swims.
You're so much more vulnerable than you would be running an ultra marathon or any other feat of endurance. You're like literally, it's like climbing Everest or something. Like you could just get killed in a second.
Is exactly it. Yeah. And but also doing it kind of blind. So if you get killed, you won't even know about it. Like something will just come and take you out. And I think you're absolutely right in that left unchecked, your mind will go to a million places. What was that touched my face? Is it a jellyfish? It just, and you can't do that. It's like, I always think like your mind is almost like this like horse, this wild horse. If you tame it, it's so powerful. If not, it will just run riot and you will not know what to do. And there was always various mechanisms that you could use, or I certainly did, but never one. Because I think a lot of people will go, what one trick did you use? And I was like, no, think of it more like the TV channel. And every swim you'd get in, and some days you'd have a thought, something like a quote, a teaching that would be really powerful and potent, and that could get you through. I always talk about, swimming with a smile and the science of a smile, because there was times when just camaraderie and just, and again, this is backed by studies. There was a great study where they showed cyclists cycling to complete exhaustion, these pictures of people either smiling or frowning, but they were so short, it was almost these subliminal cues, so it barely registered on a conscious level. And what they found emphatically was those that were showing these pictures of people smiling were far more resilient to fatigue than those that were showing them frowning. So with this, it's kind of proven, it's like swim with a smile, the science of a smile, but that won't work every time. Sure. And there's sometimes where, I've got jellyfish tentacles in my beard, I'm cracking my wetsuit, my tongue's falling off, and the team will be like, just smile, Ross. I do not want to smile right now. So then you might use something else. I think it was Aristotle when he said, if you want to leave society, you need to become a god or a beast. And I kind of loved that phrase, because I was just becoming more feral as the days went on, just hairy, chubby. My girlfriend would come on the boat and be like, why does your wetsuit smell of urine? I was like, I'm sorry. And I think that was also quite powerful. And I talk about stress-induced analgesia. So the way that an injured animal will just fight to the death because it's feral, it's full of fear, it's full of stress. And there was times where that was actually quite empowering, that I was in so much pain. I was so exhausted that I just didn't care. Jellyfish were just like slapping me in the face. I was like, I don't care anymore. And so it was always knowing which one to use. And there was various more as well, but you couldn't just stick to one because smiling all the way around wouldn't work and being feral wouldn't work as well. You need to just switch between all of them. Yeah, there was, so one thing that really resonated with me, again, in sports science, when they talk about adaptive and maladaptive mechanisms for coping with pain. And I think the words that you use, people don't really understand it, but the words, if you've ever run an ultra marathon or, you listen to some of those people, when they check into those stops and their feeding stations with their team, the best ones, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Courtney Dogwater. When you see her, she's smiling the whole way around. She's amazing. And you see others coming in. Cameron Haynes as well is another one. He's just there running, going, oh, keep hammering. He's just got a grin on his face. You're like, oh my God. And I find that fascinating, that the language that they use usually corresponds to being a good runner. It's not necessarily biomechanics and VO2, lactic threshold. It's that mentality. And other runners will come in and go, oh, I can't go on. I'm dying. My legs are killing me. Using these words, we just didn't tolerate that on the boat. So it was that. And then I think also as well, being so objective, going back to the central governor and psychobiological model of fatigue, that me and Captain Matt, we'd have these meetings before every swim and they were void of emotion. We just needed to communicate what was going on. So I would be like, good morning. He'll be like, good morning. I'll be like, what's the tide doing? He'll be like, tide's really slow and we're going to get caught in a storm and the water is about 5 degrees. So we need to watch for hypothermia. How are you feeling? And I'll be like, tongue's falling off. I'm losing fingernails and I haven't slept in 48 hours. And he'd go, so what do you want to do? And I'll go, swim. So it was just that.
So that's sort of the Stoic idea of kind of stripping judgment out of it, because the judgment doesn't change the reality of the situation. If you come into the station and you're like, it's terrible out there, I feel terrible, I don't know if I can go on, all of that is coloring the situation that you're in, and it's not making it worse, but it's not making it better, right? It's not making it more likely you'll be able to do this really hard thing.
Yeah, is exactly it. And I think we did that. We started doing that almost just organically, naturally. But then, like you said, later learned that, it's your judgment of it that will make it so much worse. So it very quickly became, we just don't have any room for complaining or just anything. Because, and again, it was to your point that no one was holding a gun to my head. So if I wanted to complain, I was also, a lot of people said this when they were like, Ross, it was amazing watching the whole thing. You didn't cry once, and everything. I was like, yeah, I wanted to, but I just knew it wouldn't help. And objectively looking at my day, I swim for 12 hours, I eat and do rehab for the rest, and what's left, I just try and sleep to try and recover. So I was like crying in that 24-hour sort of period. I don't have time. So it was also that as well, that just... Is exactly it. And it was also as well in your head, just quitting was just a non-negotiable. So it was just when people said, did you ever think about quitting? I was like, no. We never discussed that. It just wasn't ever part of our vocabulary. And so even again, going back to that safety net, but I did know the words I quit wouldn't come out of my mouth, but I could be carried out on a stretcher. Against my will, and there was that element as well, I think, which is related to the pain. It's just going, how much are you going to endure? And I'm just sort of sitting there going, well, I'll be taken out on a stretcher against my will. So that's my threshold. You're so right. And I think all of these survival stories, Shackleton, I love like Shackleton's story and what he did when they managed to get from the ice shelf all the way to Elephant Island and then walked across Elephant Island. People don't know that like...
And then he went back. He gets to civilization and then he goes back and he gets everyone else. It's insane.
This is what I mean. And leading, I mean, the whole exploration, the heroic age of Antarctic exploration during that period, everything was pioneering anyway. But so you had world-class navigators, sailors, explorers. But then what they did was just like unfathomable, like sleep deprived, like, you know, a year on the ice shelf. And I love what you said at the start there, which was just like, but they had no choice. Yeah. So survival is just a motivating factor. So if you can almost replicate those conditions safely, that is a huge motivating factor. And again, it goes back to stoicism when, you know, just live in poverty, you know, you'll realize what's the worst that can happen. And I think it's that element of, you know, get hungry. Too many people are just kind of, life's good, they're comfortable. And it's like, no, that's why I continue doing my ice showers, my ice baths. I run barefoot. People look at me nuts. I'm running through the woods barefoot and they're like, dude, you've got money, get shoes. I'm like, no, because you'll just get, you know, it's satiated. You'll be comfortable. So I think that's a really interesting trick inspired by Shackleton, that try and replicate the same motivating factor that sheer survival will give you. And that's in anything, you know, even if you are just like creating a business for the first time, you're writing an album, you're a musician, you're writing your first book, do it like your family are not gonna, you know, eat for a year unless you finish that book. I love that you said that, because similarly, when you know what you're capable of, just go like, these are my strengths. This is what I'm playing with. And, you know, and that was, you know, again, almost controlling the controllables, that in those 6-hour swims where the tide was with me, I was just like, or swimming 12 hours a day. I was like, I'm going to swim 12 hours a day because that's when the tide's with me. Yeah. It doesn't matter if I've got jellyfish in my face, waves, tides, you know, it doesn't matter. But that's my period to swim. So if every single day I can just swim 12 hours, eventually you will get around Great Britain. And it was just breaking it down like that, like exactly what you just said there, which was just, you know, how do you know it's possible when you've never done it before? When you break it down, you go,
it is a math, at a certain point, it's just a math equation, right? Like, it's like, hey, like with books, it's like, okay, how many pages is a book? How many pages are you doing a day? Eventually you'll get to the end if you don't stop. If you stop, of course, you won't get there. But if you don't quit, eventually you'll get there. You could have the worst time in the whole world, but if you don't quit, you'll get there.
It's definitely, I know what you said, because it really does just boil down to maths. It's maths and logic. When I said I was going to climb a rope, so it was a 20-meter rope repeatedly, the height of Everest, at 8,848 meters. I remember I told my dad, and my dad is so like stoic and objective. And I remember he just immediately pulled out a calculator and then just worked out. And he just said, you need to climb a 20-meter rope. And I can't remember what he said. It was like every minute on the minute, you know, for 20 hours with a 20-second break in between. And he just broke it all down. And I was like, 20 seconds. I could eat between that 20 seconds and go to the toilet if I needed to. Cool. I was like, done. Yeah. Where's my rope?
Well, in meditations, Marcus says, you know, you assemble your life action by action. No one can stop you from that. Meaning, you know, no one can stop you from doing the 20-meter rope, right? Like the whole thing, something could happen that prevents you from doing the entire thing, right? The rope could break or what. But the point is, like, you have the power to go, okay, I'm going to climb it one more time. Okay, I'm going to climb it one more time. And if you just focus on breaking it down to the smallest component piece, and you just go like, I just have to do this 8,000 times or whatever it is, then it really just does become a bit of a math equation.
Yeah, I like what you said though, when you just go, I just need to do this 8,000 times or whatever it is. And people always laugh, but maybe it's being so naive or a very simple man. I'm very simple. I just like look at things. And when people are like, what? I'm just like, but if you keep putting one arm in front of the other, you will swim to your destination. And then they're like, but sharks, jellyfish. I'm like, yeah, no, that's an uncontrollable. But what I can control is this. 100%. And I mean, that's what I coach so many times when I'm coaching swimming as well. One of my biggest sort of frustrations is when people start, all of a sudden they start looking at the outcome. And I think that's the worst thing you can do if you're clock watching or looking at the horizon. And so as soon, I don't entertain any questions about that. If people are going, how long's left or anything, I'll go, if you focus on the process, the outcome becomes inevitable. But if you're solely focused on the outcome, then you're not focusing on the process.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I've always found, whether it's running, swimming, cycling, it's like, just focus on putting one arm in front of the other as efficiently as possible. If you're running, that beautiful biomechanics forefoot striking, because if you do that, and also as well, whether it's psychological, spiritual, when you get into that flow state, as it's called, if you just get in that, all of a sudden you look up and go, oh my God, I've just covered like 50 miles, swimming or whatever it is. And I think slightly related to that, and I talk about that in my book, and it was such a cool story, but the Stockdale paradox.
Yes.
And with Admiral Stockdale, and he just sort of said, prisoner of war, Vietnam, he could point out those people who just wouldn't make it.
Yeah, the optimists.
Exactly right. Yeah, he was just like the optimist. And I found that so often that it's just like that Stockdale paradox. You absolutely need hope. You need hope. You need to hold on to hope. But equally, you have to face up to your current reality. And for me, in all sport, that resonated so much because you cannot keep going, oh, this will be over soon. We'll be in a warm bubble bath and it's going to be amazing, because that warm bubble bath didn't come for 157 days for me.
Yeah.
And I think the media on a lot of my swims, the media always press me. Of course they do, for an answer saying, when are you going to finish? What's the target? And if you then don't meet that target, we for the Great British Swim, for instance, a lot of people said 100 days because it just had a nice ring to it. But I was like, you don't know, like the ocean have completely other ideas. So when we didn't make it 100 days, a lot of people were like, oh, sorry. I was like, why are you sorry? I was like, it's fine. This is just going to take as long as it takes. And that just getting real philosophical about it, we were like, I think definitely empathetic. I mean, I think I find him fascinating because, again, I'm sort of like, the science of a smile. And whereas he's just...
It seems darker for him.
He's a little bit darker. And it would be amazing to go for a run with him because I'd just be there like, suffering strategically managed, David, and he'll just be like, shut the fuck up. but that sort of goes back to what I was saying at the start, that no mechanism is the best way. It's find whatever in that moment is the most powerful and potent to get you through it. He seems to swear a lot, but it works. Like, you cannot argue with the results. But it would be really interesting to go, subliminal cues, people smiling or frowning. It'd be like, and that's what I'm thinking that but I'm actually, because again, you can't smile all the time. And friends of mine in the military, it is amazing to sort of use what they have as well. So yeah, I could be more Goggins. When I look at Cameron Haynes, I'm like, just that like proper work ethic and discipline. I'd love to pick up on everything, that idea of just kind of being a chameleon and going, well, what did you use? Because I'll try that.
Sure.
So you might see a video of me just like cussing, like running in the woods, and you're like, oh, it's working.